Well, Donald Trump has ordered hundreds of federal agents to withdraw from Minneapolis amid sustained pressure in the wake of Alex Pretty's killing by officers. While the president has suggested a softer touch may be needed in the city, he's vowed to remain tough on immigration. Shrai Popat is a U.S. politics reporter for The Guardian in Washington, D.C., and he joins me now. Shrai, good to have you with us today and appreciate you getting up so early where you are. Now, Trump's border chief says 700 ICE agents will be removed from Minnesota, but there are, still about 2,000 plus left. Does this really signal a winding down of the immigration crackdown, particularly in that state and city?
I think right now, it at least seems that this is a way for the administration to de-escalate what's happening there. Tom Homan, as you mentioned, Trump's border czar, was brought into Minneapolis and the Twin Cities area more generally to try and calm things down after we saw the death of Alex Pretty by immigration agents and Renee Good, also killed by immigration agents just 2 weeks prior to that. It's resulted in huge backlash against the administration's crackdown in the state, particularly that city. And this right now is probably the first and clearest example of the administration trying to wind back a lot of that sort of fervent opposition that we've seen there. But as you mentioned, there are still about 2,000 immigration agents on the ground, which is a significantly higher number than are normally stationed in Minneapolis. Normally it's around 100 to 150 agents.
Yes, and you mentioned Renee Good and Alex Pretty there. What do we know about the latest in terms of investigations as far as the involvement of those agents involved in their killings is concerned?
Yeah, so last week we saw the Trump's Department of Justice open a civil rights investigation into the killing of Alex Pretty, which is something that the general public obviously have been pushing for, greater accountability. The governor, Tim Walz, there has been pushing for an investigation, but this is a federal investigation, in some ways sort of under duress by sort of the court of public opinion, and we're going to have to see where that goes. There still isn't a federal investigation right now into the killing of Renee Good. We're still waiting on some sort of movement on that. And one of the big issues here is that state prosecutors, state investigators feel like they've been left out of the conversation. They've been frozen out by federal officials here and taking over the investigation. And so there are greater calls among local officials, particularly the governor here, for a state-led investigation into both of their deaths.
So Trump said he personally made this request for this drawdown. Was this made perhaps with the midterms in mind?
I think right now it's hard to not see how anything that this administration is doing might reflect probably more generally on the Republican Party's stance on immigration. However, remember, Trump isn't on the ballot in 2026 this year, but a number of his supporters, the number of the people that he backs are. And as always, it's going to be some sort of referendum on the leadership of this party. We've seen huge backlash, and I don't think the administration were prepared for the backlash that we've seen in Minneapolis and the Twin Cities area. It's been resolute. We've seen sort of demonstrations consistently sort of persist. We've seen people take to it, and we've seen Republican lawmakers push back against the tactics that have been used in Minnesota, whether that's been sort of raids that have taken place in car parks, near schools, and seem to be indiscriminate and racially profiling as well.
Now, the Democratic members of the U.S. House Committee, they've released findings of a report examining last month's fatal shootings there, essentially accusing the White House and the DHS, Homeland Security, of a cover-up. What's been the response to this?
I think what's happened in response is it's sort of fulfilling a lot of what Democrats have wanted to do in terms of holding this administration account when it comes to immigration policy more broadly as well. I think Democrats in both chambers of Congress have been resolute and outspoken in the way that they see this administration handling immigration more broadly, the tactics used, as I mentioned earlier, but also what's happened in Minnesota and how sort of agents there have acted with impunity. And this right now is another example of how these Democratic lawmakers in the states are trying to hold this administration to account.
Yes, and one way of doing that is the likelihood of another shutdown of Congress. What's happening on that front?
Yeah, so right now, the U.S. House sent appropriations bills to the president's desk to sign. One of the notable exceptions to that was a full-year funding bill for the Department of Homeland Security. Yes. They're saying that they need at least 2 weeks to negotiate with the White House and Republicans in Congress to set up some guardrails for the department. They need to see things like judicial warrants for ICE raids. They need to make sure that agents aren't wearing masks and seem undercover when they are carrying out their operations. They can't be roving around Minnesota and appearing to be sort of a quote-unquote secret police. They're asking for more of those guardrails, and they're threatening otherwise to shut down the government and fail to pass a funding bill to keep DHS open. It's worth noting, though, that DHS does have a backstop. It has money guaranteed in the One Big Beautiful Bill that the president signed last year, sort of hallmark piece of legislation that has billions of dollars worth of funding that the DHS can draw upon. So not all hope is lost for the department in that respect.
Okay. And just meanwhile, the man who tried to assassinate Donald Trump back in 2024, he's been given a life sentence. Tell us about what happened in court, because there was quite the drama there.
Yeah, so if you remember Ryan Ruth, who is the person who was was convicted and has now been sentenced to a life sentence for attempting to kill the president at his Mar-a-Lago golf club while he was playing golf. He was sentenced to life imprisonment. The judge there, Eileen Cannon, was pretty resolute in her sentencing. She said it was premeditated, his behavior was evil, and this is sort of the completely right punishment for his attempts to, he says, vocalize his sort of love to the nation. She said this is obviously in no way reflective of that. And if you remember last year when Ruth was when Ruth was convicted, there was a lot of drama in the courtroom when he attempted to stab himself in the neck with a pen. He was, at his sentencing yesterday, extremely convinced that what he was doing was the right thing for the nation. Eileen Cannon sort of shut that down immediately.
Okay, Shrai Popat, really appreciate your updates there from Washington. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.